Let's face it, something's not right. The golden promise that was once California is fading. The high cost of living, soaring housing costs, and a poor economic climate are driving people and businesses out of the state. We can do better. We have to. I'm Lanhee Chen, and I grew up in an LA suburb. My parents immigrated from Taiwan, and like a lot of new Americans, they wanted the best for their family.
It's what eventually brought them to California. I went to a public high school here in Rowland Heights, and like a lot of other kids growing up in SoCal, I was a diehard Laker and Dodger fan, and still am. When I was 17, I left California and went to Harvard, where I went to college, and then got a master's, a law degree, and my PhD.
After helping both Republicans and Democrats develop policies to address some of America's biggest challenges, like improving our healthcare system, saving Social Security, and growing our economy, I moved back to California to raise a family with my wife and our 2 kids. It's here where I've continued my work, teaching at Stanford, researching and advising on fiscal policies, helping to run my community hospital, and working with entrepreneurs to help them grow their businesses and create new jobs.
Today, it breaks my heart to see the California I love failing to live up to its promise. That's why, with my family, I've decided to run for California State Controller.
Why Controller? Well, the Controller is California's independent fiscal watchdog, the person who makes sure that taxpayer money, our money, is spent as we're told it will be. That's not happening now. In fact, the Controller can't even tell us where she sent over $300 billion in payments in 2018 alone. With my experience in policymaking and a strong belief in the values of fiscal responsibility, transparency, and independence, it's a job I know I can do well. For too long, the Controller has been a Sacramento insider, valuing partisanship over competence. The Controller has been beholden to other politicians, defending them instead of fighting for you. That won't be me. I'm not part of the one-party monopoly that has controlled Sacramento for too long. We're not going to change California by recycling the same old tired politicians from one job to another. Someone needs to watch out for you, the California taxpayer. We need new leadership that's not afraid to take on as much as $30 billion of fraud in our state unemployment insurance system. Russian mobsters and convicted murderers like Scott Peterson shouldn't be getting government payments while single moms in need go without. We need a check on the Sacramento politicians who spend first and ask questions later. I think the promise of California is still out there, but we're going to have to start fixing our problems soon for us to make sure that the California my kids see is as bright and promising as the one that led my parents to move here 35 years ago. Join me. Together, I know we can change California. Let's start today.
各位好，欢迎收看凤凰卫视每周台为您带来的天天话题之财经专栏。在今天的节目当中呢，我们特别为您邀请到的是加州主计长的候选人 Dr. Lanhee Chen. Hello, Dr. Chen. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Well, first of all, congratulations on your primary. And for folks that are not very familiar with your background, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I grew up in Southern California. I grew up in Rowland Heights, and my parents are immigrants to the U.S. from Taiwan. And I spent my childhood growing up in Rowland Heights in Southern California, and then went to Harvard and got 4 degrees from Harvard University, including my bachelor's degree, master's, a law degree, and then a PhD in political science. And then for several years served in the U.S. government. I worked for President George W. Bush on healthcare issues. I worked with Governor Mitt Romney when he ran for president. I was his chief policy advisor. And then after that, came back to join the faculty at Stanford University, and I'm a fellow at the Hoover Institution. So for the last 9 years, I've lived in the Bay Area with my wife and our 2 children. And I've been teaching public policy. I've been researching public policy. I've also started my own small business and been involved in investing in other businesses as well. So my background is in a little bit in politics, a little bit in policy, a little bit in academia for the last couple of years. And now I'm running to be the next state controller of California.
Wonderful. And now I want you to take us to the moment when you decided to run for controller. Why do you want this job?
Well, growing up in California and seeing the California that we have today, I look and I see major differences. The California that I grew up in was a place of great opportunity. I think about my own parents coming to California and the reasons they came. And now increasingly, people are leaving California. They aren't coming to California to build businesses and make lives anymore. Instead, they're looking elsewhere. They're looking to states like Texas and Nevada and Arizona. And so as I think about why we have this problem in California, one of the biggest challenges I think we have is that we don't spend taxpayer money in California very wisely. We've seen a number of scandals over the last couple of years, including $20 billion in unemployment insurance benefits that went in fraudulent payments to people in prison here in California, to people in Russia, all over the world. And that kind of waste and fraud, I think, is something that we need our public officials in Sacramento to stop. So the reason I'm running for controller is because the controller is kind of like the chief financial officer of California, but it's the state official who can really bring accountability and transparency to our state government. And so this is a very, very important role. It's not a role that reports to the governor or reports to anybody else. You actually are responsible only to the people, to the taxpayers of California. So for me, it's a very important job. It's one where I think we can make significant progress in improving the state. And that's why I'm so excited about this campaign.
Now, as a Republican candidate running for this position in California is definitely not an easy task. How are you going to win?
Well, the short answer is we have to communicate our message to Democrats and independents and Republicans throughout our state. I've been very pleased that my message, which is not really about partisanship, I often say there's not a Republican way to be the controller or a Democrat way to be the controller. I think there's a California way to be the controller, and that's to lead with innovation, to lead with a desire to be transparent and accountable to people. And so I've received the support of a lot of different groups across the political spectrum. I was endorsed by the Los Angeles Times, the first Republican to be endorsed by the LA Times in a very long time. A lot of people don't realize this. I actually served in Barack Obama's administration as well. I was appointed not just by George W. Bush, but by Barack Obama as well. And that's going to help us to bring together support from across all different parts of the political spectrum. But Aini, let me just say one other thing, which is I think one of the things that's really important in this campaign is to mobilize Asian American voters, whether it's from Chinese heritage or Korean heritage or Taiwan heritage or wherever they might come from, Vietnamese heritage. We believe that there is a coalition to be built in California that brings together Asian Americans and Hispanics and whites and African Americans. But more importantly, I think the Asian American population hasn't really been reached out to by too many candidates, obviously because of my personal background. Appealing to Asian American candidates, Asian American voters is very important. And so that is part of our campaign strategy, is to reach out to populations that Republicans haven't traditionally reached out to.
And if you're elected, what are your priorities? In California right now, we have so many issues. We have homelessness, education, inflation, and definitely COVID is not making things easier. So what are your priorities?
Well, you're absolutely right. Those are all big issues. Let me tell you, my first priority is to make sure that we can see every single dollar of state spending transparently. California is the only state in America where we don't have the state's checkbook online. You can't go and see where all of our money is spent. We spend $300 billion per year, and there's no transparency around that spending. So the first thing we need to do is to bring transparency to every single dollar of state spending. Number two is the controller can audit any program in California at any time for any reason. So we need to get to the bottom of where all the money is going on homelessness spending. You mentioned our schools. We're spending so much money on our schools, but they don't seem to be getting better. In fact, in many places across our state, the schools are not performing as well as they did 10 or 15 years ago. So we need to figure out with all of this spending why those problems aren't getting any better. Let me give you one other area, public safety. In too many parts of our state, unfortunately, the recent crimes against Asian Americans have become more and more visible. And at the same time, you have people out there talking about defunding the police. Well, I oppose that concept. because I think it's very important that we understand exactly how it is that we're funding public safety, and we should be supporting law enforcement, not working against them. So I would love to bring true transparency and accountability and demanding results for our spending in all of these areas.
And the controller is actually a policymaker. How are you going to work with the Democratic legislature? I mean, people are always going to challenge you on your decisions simply because you're a Republican.
Well, part of the reason why I think my candidacy is important is because we need to bring more balance to our state. The entirety of Sacramento is run by Democrats. Everyone from the governor to the legislature, everybody's a Democrat. One of the reasons why a lot of Democrats and independents support me is because they want to bring balance back to the political system. They want somebody to be a check and balance on the rest of government. So while I think there will be lots of opportunities to work together with others, if they want transparency, if they want accountability, we're going to work just fine together. But where there are situations where somebody doesn't want transparency or they don't want to be accountable for the spending, then we're going to have conflict. And that's part of, I think, a healthy political system. So we'll work together where we can, but I'm also not going to be afraid to challenge people when they're unwilling to give us a true answer about where all the money is going, how it's being spent, and how effectively the money is going to solve or not solve these big problems we've talked about.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. Let's take a break and we'll be right back. 那我们先休息下，进入广告。广告过后呢，我们再来继续今天的天天话题，不要离开。感谢回来，在今天的节目当中呢，我们继续为您邀请到的是加州主计长的候选人 Dr. Lanhee Chen. So Dr. Chen, in California, the fraud was so widespread that the state officials actually okayed at least 810 million benefits in the names of people who were in prison. Can you speak on some of the recent EDD scandals and what you would have done differently as controller?
Well, we need accountability. We needed a controller who was willing to say, is this program operating the right way? Does it make sense? The reason that we sent all of this money to people who didn't deserve it, who shouldn't have it, is because during COVID-19, at the start of the pandemic, instead of figuring out who was qualified to get these benefits and giving only the qualified people benefits, Governor Newsom made the decision to give everybody who applied benefits. And the problem with that, of course, is that a lot of people decided to commit fraud. And so we saw $20 billion of our money going to pay, as you noted, people in prison, people around the world. In fact, we know some of it went to Russia, to criminal gangs in Russia, and $800 million at least went to people in state prison in California. That's unacceptable. The controller needs to be making sure that these programs are operating properly. We need to fix the EDD program, which you mentioned. This is the program that sent all these benefits out. We need to fix this program once and for all. And as controller, one of my priorities is going to be to make sure that we actually get it fixed. We upgrade the computer systems that allow this to happen. We make sure that we put in place the right kind of eligibility monitors so that we're not sending benefits fraudulently to people. A lot of things we can do just by keeping a closer watch on all of this spending and where all of this money is going, and particularly the EDD program has to be fixed.
I know you received a huge endorsement from the LA Times editorial board and are saying California needs a fiscal watchdog. What's your reaction to that?
I was very pleased to have their endorsement, especially since they don't usually endorse Republicans. But, it's just a very, very important argument that they made, which is that we need balance in our state. We need somebody to be a watchdog. I'm really honored. I have the support of 16 newspapers across the state of California, a lot of newspapers who don't traditionally endorse people who are right of center, who are Republicans. They all made the same conclusion, which is that California's spending is broken. We need to spend smarter. And the only way we do that is with someone who is watching over the spending, making sure it's happening, and who's got the right experience and background. As I said earlier, I think one of the things the LA Times noted is that I have a background in looking at large financial systems. I understand the issues that we need to solve if we're going to improve the situation in our state. So I'm very pleased to have their support and hope to have the support of other newspapers and people across our state as well.
I know you worked for Mitt Romney as his policy director and also served on the Social Security Advisory Board as an Obama appointee. Tell us about your experience working with the Democratic administration.
Well, we worked very well together. My board that I served on, the Social Security Advisory Board, which I was appointed to by President Obama, is the board that oversees our Social Security program at the national level. It's actually a bipartisan board, so Republicans and Democrats have to work together every day. And I got along great with my colleagues on that board. We were able to advance solutions to some of the big challenges that the Social Security program faces. And one of the things I'm very proud of is my ability to work with people, whether they're Republicans or Democrats. I don't come into this role trying to get conflict against everybody. That's not my approach. My approach is to be tough, to make sure we're asking questions. But if we can work together with people, we should try to work together with people. But at the end of the day, California is in a big trouble when it comes to our financial situation. And so I am going to Sacramento to help fix the problems we have, to make sure that we leave our kids and grandkids with a better California, as I'm sure many of your viewers would love to be able to have.
Now, how will you use your role as controller to help improve the lives of Chinese American residents living in California?
Well, the most important thing is we need to figure out where all of our tax money is going. I talk to a lot of people in the Chinese community, in the Asian community, actually Californians across our state. And they all tell me the same thing. They say it feels like we're paying more in taxes every single year, but we're getting less and less. And I think that perception stems from the fact that government is not very efficient. It's very wasteful. And so one of the things that I can do for people in our state who are of Chinese background, or really any background at all, is to make sure that we are giving people full transparency into how the money is being spent. We also need to do a much better job of improving our education system in California. I know many Chinese Americans and Chinese background in California, they care about the schools, they care about the state of our schools. And I want to do what I can to make sure the money we're spending is going to those schools effectively so that we can actually help our children. And then I mentioned earlier, we got to keep our communities safe and make sure that the money that is supposed to go to law enforcement, to the police departments, is actually getting there. I've heard so many stories about money that was supposed to go to law enforcement that isn't getting to our law enforcement officials. And so we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to support law enforcement and keep our communities safe. So those are the big priorities. And I think those are issues that Chinese Americans care about, but they're also issues that California families from many different backgrounds care about as well.
Now, what's the final thing you want to say to the voters for the November election?
The most important thing I can say is please vote. It's really important to participate. In so many elections, Chinese American voters have not shown up. We just haven't participated. We need to make our voice heard. And the only way we do that is by voting. So everybody is going to be mailed a ballot in October. I encourage you to fill that ballot out, vote for me for controller, but make sure that you're voting, turn in your ballot. You can go vote early in person. You can go vote on election day, however you're most comfortable doing it. My message to the Chinese community is, first of all, vote. And second of all, support me, Lanhee Chen, for state controller, because I believe it's so important that we finally bring accountability back to our tax dollars here in California.
Dr. Lanhee Chen, running for state controller, thank you for your time. And of course, we'll be following this election closely. 同时也非常感谢各位的收看，我们下期同一时间再见。
您正在收看的是凤凰卫视。